All right, good evening, listeners. Welcome to Motley Crude, episode number 33. I'm Kevin, and I've got the full crew with me this evening. So starting with Ryan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
I'm doing great. And what about you, Andrew?
Just peachy.
Awesome, good stuff. So this evening we've got a bit of a two-part episode. So we're going to be talking first of all about a recent RTT that we collectively participated in / ran from Ryan's perspective last weekend with all the new FAQ rules, etc. And then we're also going to be going back and reviewing what was announced in the Big Summer Preview just over a week ago, and giving our impressions about all of that stuff. So before we get going, as per usual, let's do a bit of what's new in everybody's hobby. So let's kick off with Andrew this week.
For me, a little bit less than I normally do. I just kind of hit a wall with making terrain stuff. I have an in-law in town right now, so it's kind of taking up my free time, even like after my kids go to bed. But I have been working on more terrain for CCBB, and as well as a terrain commission for Kevin here. And then I've been trying to print something on my 3D printer for my Dark Elf army, but I've done it 3 times now, and the print keeps failing, and I'm not really sure why, because I've re-sliced everything a few times, cleaned out my vat, I've reset the printer, and it just only ever keeps printing supports as opposed to the actual model. Not really sure what the fuck's going on with that, but it's getting kind of annoying because I'm wasting time and resin trying to get this to work. So I'm gonna redo it again tomorrow and see if we can actually get to print.
What are you trying to print?
Um, I have. I think I might have mentioned this on one of the episodes, but I downloaded a bunch of stuff at the beginning of Old World. Some guy had um, scanned a bunch of the old
Yeah.
metal Dark Elf miniatures.
Yeah.
So in my new list, which I guess we'll talk about for the tournament, I had taken my general off of his dragon and put him on a chariot.
Mm-hmm.
So um in like this sort of batch of STLs from these scans, someone has the old Dark Elf chariot with like the big fat cold ones.
Yep.
And um this is gonna make me sound like a bad Dark Elf player, but I forget the name of this character, but he's the dude that's in all like the comic books that were written about him.
Is it Malice Darkblade?
That's the guy.
Yeah.
So there's a version of him on foot with like his like sword hanging out like out front, and it looks all badass. So I'm trying to print him, and he's gonna be like the guy on the chariot because he'll fit like perfectly because it's
Nice.
just like a single foot troop. So I'm trying to print this thing, and I have it all cut up and sliced properly. I gave it supports like in there's a program called like Chitterbait or something,
Sure.
which like it's like what you use to 3D print on a resin printer. Chipbox is the name of it. So I have it all done up, and like every time I've done this sort of process with other stuff, like there's no issues. But for some reason, I've tried 3 times with this Dark Elf print, and all it does is print like the bases, like the support bases for it, and a bit of the supports, and then it just like says like, oh, it finishes after 30 minutes, and it says like complete print, even though the actual print, when I take it off of the program, it says it's supposed to take 3 hours. So
Sure.
for whatever reason, it's just like stopping after 30 minutes and saying like, okay, we're done, and like nothing's actually printing. So like I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't want to keep trying because I'm just wasting like resin on like basically just bases and supports that with no models in it. So I might try like just redoing the whole file that I made and like cutting it and trying to print again, but if that fails, like I'm just gonna give up because I already have a cold one chariot that I can use as to represent this unit anyway. It's just something I
Yeah,
wanted to do because it's gonna look like way more badass than sort of the standard cold one
sure.
chariot.
Yeah. Yeah, so unfortunately, I can't help you with the 3D printing nonsense. But if somebody listening to this knows, make sure to write in the comments for the episode what you think Andrew's problem is and give him a hand there. Um, cool. Yeah, aside from that, let's move to Ryan. What's new in your hobby, man?
I've been furiously assembling miscellaneous Empire things. Some
Looks
painting,
wicked.
mostly building stuff. Thanks. Yeah, no, I've been having a lot of fun. For those of you who haven't seen things, the army's themed around like mercenaries in the employ of the city of Nuln. So like, there's a lot of dwarf and some Cathay bits mixed in. Just today, I was working on turning Chaos Knights less chaosy so
Yeah.
that I could use them as Empire Knights, uh, things like that. So that's mostly what I've been up to.
Nice. And then and then you've converted a like a Shugengan Lord to be a mount for like an Empire General, is it?
Yeah, so that would be like a general on a hippogriff type deal.
Nice. Yeah, no, the army's gonna be sick. It's gonna be super like thematic and like personalized and stuff. Like it looks good. And
And I got
listeners,
the
if you
sweet
yeah, sorry.
War Games Atlantic ogres.
Yeah, they look great. They actually look great.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I was gonna say. Like the ogres with like the cannons as guns.
yeah.
It's so good. It looks really great.
Yeah, I have from like the same manufacturer. I have a bunch of boxes for the Tilea or Dogs of War armies. So when I saw you build those, it's the first times I actually seen like I've actually seen War Games Atlantic's models. I thought they look great. So I'm looking forward to cracking my boxes open at some point, building a Dogs of War army. Yeah, listeners, if you want to see what Ryan's conversions look like, you can join our Discord, and they're all posted up there. Cool. And then on my end for what's been happening in my hobby. So I've been mentioned last episode. I built 100 and painted up and hobbied up 120 bases for the hobgoblins. I started building them all now. I've got 80 built out of 120. I'm hoping that after the show tonight, I can build the other 40 and then just get down to brass tacks and down to painting. I've got like more or less a month before CCBB. I've never painted 120 models. It's actually like 100 and I don't know 14 or something. But like I've never painted that many models in a month, so we'll see how far I get along. But so yeah, it's going to be an interesting challenge for me for the next month. And then I had a game planned aside from the event we're going to be talking about. I had a game planned, but that one unfortunately got canceled. So yeah, no extra games played over the last over the last little bit. Cool.
Are
Yeah,
you
go
still
ahead.
on that online tournament?
It's over now. Like this is the
Oh,
last
okay,
week, and
okay.
it's all done. And my last game got canceled. So
Brutal.
yeah, that's fine. Okay, so let's move to news and upcoming events. So we're going to be, of course, all the news is related to the preview. We'll be discussing that in a little bit. Before that, Ryan, you want to talk about what's coming up in terms of events in our neck of the woods?
Yeah, so end of August, 23, 24 August, we have Capital City Bloodbath. 15-ish September, we have the Montreal Grand Tournament for Old World. And then Andrew, Danny, and I are working to set up kind of a series of events every like 6 to 8 weeks here in Ottawa. So that'll start in the fall. And then, of course, Square Base Toronto in October.
Nice. Perfect. That's good stuff. And yeah, I'm eager to see more of those RTTs in our area. The last one had some really good attendance. The one we'll be talking about tonight. So glad that we're having those on a more regular basis. Okay, let's speaking of the RTT, let's talk about that. So We had our first event here locally with all the new rules, like the match play guide, the FAQ, first, I guess, Cathay large scale event too, although no Cathay players showed up. So yeah, we had that last weekend. So we had 22 players turn out, 3 games. Like I mentioned, the new FAQ match play, all that kind of stuff. It was player place terrain. It's the pack that Ryan wrote that takes into consideration all of the new rules, and then we had the Renegades rules, which were in effect for this event, but not the new beta that was published for those like last week. We played 3 games. The first one was upon Fields of Glory with baggage trains as a secondary objective. The second one was Chance Encounter with table quarters, or I think it's called Domination, actually. And then the third one was King of the Hill, featuring the Hill as the secondary objective. Okay, so first off, what did you guys bring to the event? Like, we don't need to do a full list breakdown there, but just in general. And then were missions and the FAQ important considerations in how you built your list, or did you just sort of run with what you had before? Let's start with Ryan.
So I brought my City State of Nuln army. So like it's got halberdiers and handgunners and some outriders, a couple cannons, volley gun, and of course is led by Hans von Lohenhacky, because why wouldn't it be?
Of course.
And as to like the why, some of it was just testing things out because I hadn't actually played the army like with physical models yet. I'd only played it on Warhol so far.
Mhm.
So some of it was just seeing like, do these things work and do they work together? So that was part of it. But then yes, like definitely there was consideration to the missions in like unit sizes and the amount of things that I tried to make sure I had in core and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So on my end, I brought an updated version of my what I'm calling my Chaos Dwarf Flying Circus list. So I had a Wyvern in there, 2 Tauruses, like Seneschals on Taurus, basically, 2 Tauruks, Bull Centaur Tauruks. I brought 4 Bolt Throwers this time, which I haven't taken in a long time, just because I thought everybody was going to attack super hard into infantry, and they're pretty decent at killing infantry. And then to play the missions, so the answer is yes, I made some changes. To play the mission, I had 3 units of about 40 hand weapon and shield hobgoblins in core, which turned out to be a really good pick. So the big change I made, obviously, as I mentioned, was swap out the Infernal Guard for like all the hobgoblins to have units, and I think more importantly, like a lot of unit strength to play the missions. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, the 4 bolt throwers. So those are like the main changes. Andrew, what did you bring?
I brought essentially a modification of like my sort of standard tournament list. The big thing, I guess, the change was is I dropped my dragon general onto a chariot instead of the dragon. And the reason for that was to free up points in my character slot to put the hag on a cauldron. Um, with the renegade sort of rules, like the cauldron's really like a strong piece,
Yeah.
and it's something I've wanted to use for a while, but it's like pre like sort of 1.5, it's like I kind of still needed that dragon to do a lot of the heavy lifting in this army with the hag witches, but it was mostly the dragon. Now given, there's objectives and like table courts and stuff like that, I
Yep.
felt that I can get away from relying on that dragon, especially because, given all the sort of debuffs that those monstrous characters have had,
Hmm.
especially compared to sort of unit blocks, that I was like, okay, I think I can comfortably not take the dragon, and just kind of focus more on the hag unit, which we can talk about later. But I
Yep.
think it was the right plan. So that was kind of the big change. And then because I only actually have one chariot model, I took that out of the list in my rare slot because I usually take the chariot anyway. And
Yep.
I put shades in instead. So that was kind of like the big swap, was just no more dragon. The general gets the chariot, and then with those extra points, I took the Cauldron of Blood and a small unit of 6 shades.
Yeah, so you had some pretty significant changes to your list, actually. Yeah.
Sure, but like also it's basically the same list, other
Yeah.
than those kind of like couple like swap arounds. Like it's the same list.
Okay, so it plays similar nonetheless.
Yeah, it plays very similar.
Okay, cool. Perfect. So then let's go right back to you, Andrew. Like, how did the event go overall? Like, we don't need to do full game recaps. We'll be focusing more on like how the new pack interacted with the event tonight. But like overall, how did your event go? And then is there anything you want to shout out or discuss from your games?
I mean, like specifically, I want to shout out my opponents. This is a big event, but like everyone I played was like super chill and fun to just play against. So like that's always good. Like every once in a while when you go to sort of bigger events, you might run into like I don't want to say like a bad
Yeah,
player or like a dick, but like
yeah, yeah, sure.
everyone I played with was like super awesome. Even the games where I didn't do well, um, you know, like everyone was like super gracious and like very nice. So like I can't downplay those people because like every game I had was just awesome. Um, I did so overall the weekend. My first game was a loss. My second game was a tie, and then my third game was a win. So
Nice.
I kind of ran the gamut of like options of what you can outcomes of matches. But like every game was like sweaty, but also like we were still like jovial and like kind of like shooting the shit in between like stuff going on. So like everything was really fun. Like it was a great event, I think.
Nice. Perfect. Good. And I think you played 2 of my 3 opponents. Also, you played against Chris and Hutch, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I challenged Hutch the first round because we go way back. We played back in 8th edition. He's been coming to like every sort of Can Hammer event that I've run. So like I know him, so just like it's been a while since like him and I have actually met up on the board just because I'm usually either running events or he's admittedly a much better player than I am. So like even in like bigger tournaments where we're both playing, like he usually is above me in the rankings and is playing more harder opponents. So I was like, fuck it, like I'll challenge you first round just so we can actually like have a game together. He whooped my ass, but um we can go into that later if you want. And then my second round opponent, I guess he had played you first round, so he made
Yeah.
the joke that like, oh, I guess like this weekend I'm just gonna play the whole Motley Crude
Nice.
at the event. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Good. Good stuff. Yeah. And I think you were saying you wish you had a redo against for the game with Hutch, right?
Yeah, so like that game, like I never felt like I made a lot of misplays with some of my stuff, and there was like kind of like one major combat where he passed a dice roll that was kind of in my favor of winning. So like there was a combat where I did a lot of combat res, and against one of his like sort of major blocks with his general, or I don't know if it was general, but like his doom ball with like all the gear.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
I
with
won that
like the black
combat.
mace and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like all of his like his eggs were in that basket, and I won that combat pretty handily just because of he wasn't able to get a lot of attacks into the unit based on like a weird challenge we had and sort of the placement of our 2 characters in those units. Um there was that plus he was already at like a -1 to his leadership check on that because I think my Charybdis was nearby.
Sure.
Um so like he should have kind of broke based on like just stats, but he nailed that role like pretty handily, and that could have changed like the flow of that game.
Sure.
And he ended up coming back and like bringing that back, and then that was my first game of the day, and it was the first time I've ever ran shades in my Dark Elf list, so I kind of didn't use them optimally and kind of just like threw them at something stupid that they kind of didn't have the capabilities of dealing with to begin with. Um, so with that, plus like a few other like small things, like it went in Hutch's favor. But I feel like if we play that again, Maybe I won't beat him, but it'll definitely be like a much closer
Yeah.
match because like he like at the end of the day, I think it was like he got like 800 points off of me, and I only got like 100 or like less than 100.
Sure.
But I feel that match could have been a lot closer if I was kind of playing a little bit smarter or move my pieces a little better, or that like that one combat where it should have kind of leaned more in my favor. He didn't win, and then that would have like snowballed something in the other direction. But Hutch is as he's been playing a long time. He knows his army in and out. He played really well, and I kind of didn't play that well.
Sure. Yeah, that happens. We all fumble a game once in a while. Okay, cool. Ryan, so you unfortunately had to step out for the third game to replace Danny, who got pulled away for who was the TO originally and got pulled away for like real life stuff. But like, how did your event go for the first two games?
It was pretty decent. My first game was into Chaos Demons. It was actually a very, very close game. All things like the actual winning of the game occurred effectively in like the back half of turn 5.
Okay.
So up until that point, it was kind of either of us could have won the game. So that was great. And then my second game was actually against Danny. And it turns out that charging a bunch of cavalry at a Renaissance era, just wall of guns and spears, is a really bad idea.
Yeah, fair.
So, so yes, unfortunately, yes, Danny's
Amazing Kislev army. Yeah.
yeah, his Kislev army just like died a horrible, horrible death, and also maintained control of like no table quarters. So
Yeah. Yikes. Yeah. So for
Yeah.
our listeners who are confused, Danny has an amazing collection of older Kislev models that he's talked about on this show. He was running them as nightly orders, I think, in this one, right?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Nightly Orders, Knights Panther specifically.
Okay. So Knights Panther versus Nuln. It's a very Empire.
Not a good matchup for Knights
Yeah,
Panther.
fair. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. And then on my end, so the event went very well. I went 3-0. I came in first overall, so that was all good stuff. So the first thing I want to shout out is my 3 opponents, as Andrew did. So in game 1, I played against Chris, listener of the podcast. He was playing Vampire Counts. Had a good game against him, a lot of fun. Game 2, I played against Hutch, so me and Andrew traded opponents there, and his Beastman. And then the third game was against another Nuln army, so we had 2 Nuln armies out of 22 players, which was wild. That was Frank, another listener of the podcast. So Chris and Frank specific one, Hutch too, actually. All 3 of you guys, shout out to all 3 of you. So the 3 games were really fun games. They all turned into like positional KG matches of like the old world, and these guys were a blast to play against, as I mentioned. So yeah, I'd say all 3, like the 3 wins came down to positioning and movement. And I'd say in Frank's case, movement shenanigans that I pulled off. So it was, it was a really good run. For me, the event confirmed that like a pack of monsters still has plenty of play in this like new meta that we're in. But I think like a list with a single dragon or equivalent monster is like in a really poor place right now. In my list, I'd say like my MVP award goes to like the Hobgoblins. I fell in love with these guys over the weekend, given how they play the missions now. Like 40 bodies for around 180 points with full command and a 4-up save is just like a wildly good deal. They play the missions like absolute champs, and like they're basically like static combat res 6. And I think they won like all the combats they were involved in this weekend, so it was just good. And then the like underperforming unit award goes to bolt throwers. They basically did nothing of value all event. And I'm almost entirely sure I'm going to swap them out before CCBB. I may return the toughness 5 Taurus to my list, or maybe I'll do like a level 1 caster and some cons on wolves, just to just to round out the list there. So anyways, that's how everything went for me. Shout out to my 3 opponents, and it was 3 good games. So, okay, let's talk about the new mission pack in action. So we've all done a little bit of testing, and played the new missions and talked about them and all that kind of stuff. But it was the first time in an event context that we sort of saw them. So yeah, I'm going to start with you, Andrew. How do you think like the new secondaries worked out overall in a sort of competitive event environment?
Thanks. Personally, I think they work very well. I think it very much changed like sort of the dynamic of how the missions go. A lot of the times, either me or my opponent were also always keeping those secondaries into account. And it very much affected the flow of the game as well as like those outcomes. So like against me and Hutch, like it was a bit of a blowout, but um, you know, us committing resources to either keeping our baggage trains alive or trying to commit stuff to go after it was like a big part of our strategies and like the way we were playing.
Yeah.
And then like even my last game against I think his name was Chris. No, Evan. Secondaries 100% won me that game. It was King of the Hill.
Yeah.
And I was able to with the use of scouts, take the hill before the game even started, and throughout the whole game, I kept position of the hill every single turn, um, and really didn't kill that much of his actual army, but just because of my control of that hill the whole game, that's what kind of won me it. Even
Yeah.
though like his very defensive like Nurgle demons and stuff, like he was rolling super hot on like ward saves and stuff, so like he wasn't actually dying in combat a lot, and we were just kind of having like these kind of limp wristed fights. But just because I had the hill the whole game, I got like a huge lead on him, and like that's why I
Yeah.
won. So I feel like yes, very much like objective play and like the new match play guide stuff added to that like definitely affects the outcome of your games.
Yeah, nice. And then just to get onto your last point there for a bit, once you sit on top of that hill, like it puts so much pressure on your opponent with that like timer ticking, and every half a turn you get like 100 points out of it. It's that changes the dynamic for sure.
Yeah, and it adds up fast.
Yeah, like crazy, crazy fast. Ryan, how do you feel before we get into all the interesting stuff here? How do you feel overall, generally, about how like the secondaries and how the new missions all came together in an event?
I think it worked really well. We got a lot of positive feedback about how they worked, and I think the biggest observation that came out of it was like, even if they aren't dictating who won the game or even deciding what the like bracket outcome of the game was, um, the table quarter, the not the table quarters, the secondaries we chose all dictated where the game happened on the table,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
was new and different for a lot of people, and they seemed to like it. Um, so like, baggage train, it was I think almost everyone actually went for it, even if they didn't need to or
Mhm.
tried to anyway. Um, same for table quarters and the hill. So you played 3 games, and in those 3 games, it wasn't just march to the middle and smash rectangles together until someone wins.
Yeah.
People were actually, playing a more game that was spread across the whole board.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, on my end, I really enjoyed playing the new missions like for the first time in an event context. I think most of all, what it adds for me is it gives something for your core to do. Like, there's a few armies out there that have like just generally useful core, but outside of those, it often feels like a taxed, or at best it feels like a taxed, or it becomes like free-ish points for your opponents in most cases. So having a nice role for it to play where your core can actually contribute to winning or losing more effectively, I think is the thing that I enjoy the most out of it. So we only played with a single secondary on the board. Each time we didn't do like 3 or 4 as some other sort of parts of the community are doing, and I felt like a single secondary was good. It didn't like take over the game, like the overall match, and it very much remained a kill points game overall with some extra flavor tossed in, which I really appreciated, and I think is the way I'd like to keep going forward in terms of how events run the new mission pack. And then like the new deployments were also super interesting. Chance encounter in particular, the one that we'll talk about in a few minutes there, but that's in quarters. That one was super impactful. To how the game played out, which I really enjoyed. So overall, like I'm super happy with how it played out in an event. Now, on to some really interesting stuff. So, throughout the event, Ryan collected some stats on each match. So, he gave us all a score sheet that, detailed basically where all of our points were coming from on what turns. Ryan did that. So, Ryan, what are some of like your key sort of takeaways and the analysis that you pulled from all those numbers to just sort of help guide the discussion here?
So because of how they got filled out, really the only breakdown I had was with people were getting points from the typical, what I'll call the primary,
Yeah.
or the secondary. The granularity of the sheet was lost on some people.
Okay.
But
Okay. Sure.
anyway, um, but my big takeaways was that the right. So the secondaries, by and large, were not winning people the game.
Okay.
So like across the 3 missions, um, you have between 9 and 18% of games, depending on the secondary, being actually won by the secondary, like which is to say, like if you removed the points both players got from secondary, um, you
The
know,
still guy would still be winning. Yeah.
no, the other way around.
Okay.
Like it would either be a draw or the person who won would have
Okay.
lost.
Okay. Sure.
Um, whereas, by comparison, um, when it comes to determining the result, like because we were using Games Workshop scoring brackets, right? So 6-0, 5-1, 4-2, 3-3. For baggage train, it was like 18%. Like the bracket was determined by the secondaries. But for table quarters, it was 64% of games
Wow.
outcome. But only 18% of those was like so like the winner isn't so much getting decided, but where in the scale of victory.
Yeah. Yeah. So the
Um
degree by which they won. Yeah.
exactly, which I think is where we want this to be anyway.
Yeah.
Like and then like the hill, it's funny, like everyone loves to talk doom about how, you could potentially score 1,200 points off the hill.
Yeah.
In the entire tournament, you were the only person to actually do that.
Okay.
Nope,
Sure.
correction. You and Andrew were
Nice.
the only people to do that.
You, the
Um,
podcast. Yeah.
yeah. But like of note, like average points on the hill was 530. So,
Okay.
even though there's a lot of points available at this time with this pool of people, um, people were not like maxing out the secondaries.
Yeah.
So those were kind of my two big observations was like secondaries were not generally winning games, but they were enabling people to win games. Like, like
Sure.
18% is still a good chunk of 22 people.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Um,
is. It is.
so um, I guess what I found is like they're serving their purpose as that extra vector that might let an army archetype that wasn't going to work in just killing have an opportunity to win,
Mhm.
which leads to diversity of armies being available. So overall, I'm seeing my initial beliefs about this mission pack kind of validated by this data. I'm going to collect the same at Bloodbath in order to have a larger
Sample
pool of
size.
information to discuss off of.
Mhm. Awesome. This is like super interesting stuff. I think, so between 9 and 18%, so let's call it like average 15% of games being decided sort of win loss by the secondary is a pretty good number to be sitting at. I thought it would be more just because of like the amount of points that are up for grabs compared to how many points people usually score. But that goes into your second point, I guess, of like people are not maxing out the scores, which is interesting and I think also makes sense. Like some of them are, for instance, max scoring on domination can basically only ever happen if you table your opponent and then you still have enough units to run around everywhere. So it is very also difficult to max score some of these secondaries. And yeah, I find the fact that like 18, yeah, the fact that the brackets shifted in some cases like significantly because of the secondary to be really interesting. So like the degree of victory is really important here. So I guess overall it means that like if you're going to an event and you're just focusing on your win loss and you don't necessarily want to optimize your how like your results are coming out, then you don't need to focus too much on secondaries because you're probably still getting the same win loss record that you would have had you focused on them or not. But if you want to do as well as possible and max out those differential scores, then you don't really have a choice, right? Like 60, well, just shy of 65% of the games shifting brackets on domination, for example, means that you simply cannot ignore it. Like it's massive. It's massive. So that's all super interesting from a stats perspective. And I think to me it tells me that like as you mentioned, Ryan, the secondaries are well balanced and they're basically where we want them to be. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the numbers that I'm hearing. Andrew, any thoughts on like on those stats?
Um, I'm not really a good stats person. Um, so like when I hear stuff like that, I think of sort of my anecdotal evidence of like my games I played. Whereas like the last game, if I hadn't dominated that hill the whole game and like got all those points, I think our game would have been very much closer to a draw or potentially even a win on my opponent's side.
Sure.
Just because he was playing demons, very defensive army. He was rolling like shit hot the whole time with like his ward saves and everything. A very big Nurgle focus too. So like he had the sort of double demon save of regen and wards. And I
Yeah.
wasn't doing a lot of actual damage to his army, but just because I had that hill, like every round, I was getting 200 points. 100 points a turn. Um, so like that's 100% which won me the game. Um, but also like at the on the other side of things, like I can see where it's like the game I think can still be won on the quote unquote primary objective of the game, which is
Yeah.
just beat your opponent's ass. It's just I think it gives like a sort of outlet for players to win on that like secondary objective or like matches where a certain list may not have any business winning now has like sort of that option to go for something different and potentially win the game just because of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, but again, like I play, I want to say feeling. It's probably like a little too full of myself, but I play very much on like feeling of the game and like stats. I just don't have the mental bandwidth to like think of that too hard. If that
Sure.
makes
Sure.
sense.
No, that makes sense. And then what you're saying is like you feel like the game could still be absolutely won on the primary. And I think what Ryan was getting at is that 85% of our games were decided on like the basic old school primary. So like that is
Yeah,
totally
100%.
like you guys are in total agreement there. Um, okay, let's look at some of the mission slash like secondary combos in greater detail, and then some of the stats or like just your thoughts on that specific mix up. And yeah, so I'll always let Ryan go first, just because he may have like some interesting little stats to throw out before we go. But so Ryan, let's talk about first of all your thoughts and stats in your case. The mix between Upon Fields of Glory, which is like the old open battle basically, and then Baggage Train as a secondary.
Yes. So, open battle with baggage train wound up with. So the kind of average outcome across the entire tournament was a 5-1.
Okay,
Um, and yeah, this was the one where 18% of games the result was determined by the secondary, but only 9% of games was victory determined by the secondary.
sure.
Uh,
And those, yeah, and because the secondary is not a ton of points, those must have been very very tight games.
exactly.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, so like people were getting the winner of games was getting an average of like 230, which is, you know, destroying someone's baggage train or holding two baggage trains effectively somewhere in there.
yeah,
But yeah, so at like this was to be expected that this mission was not going to be like heavily impacted by the baggage train. But there's definitely a couple games, without getting too into the weeds here, where like, you know, it probably would have been a draw, but one player just, you know, owned the baggage train part of the game, and that's what got them the win.
sure. Awesome. Andrew, just from your own perspective, like how did Fields of Glory and Baggage Train play together?
I think it's a good combo. Uh, my game definitely was not decided based on the baggage train. Like that was just kind of gravy on Hutch's
Yeah.
part.
Hmm.
But again, that was kind of down to sort of dice rolls and me misplaying things. So uh, it's hard for me to say. So I think it wasn't a big factor in that specific game, but at the same time, it also kind of was because both myself and Hutch, the way we moved units and the way we kind of tried to protect our baggage trains
Yeah.
had a huge factor on how we moved units around the board. Um, so even if the points itself didn't directly dictate, or like looking at the raw stats, um you can say like, oh, it wasn't a big factor in our game because he still just killed a shit ton of my stuff and I basically only took off like a couple chaff pieces. um it still had a big effect on just how we moved our units around the board and tried to protect or attack things.
Yeah.
So um I think it was a big part of our game, even if the actual like raw stats on the outcome of that game don't reflect that.
Yeah. And this goes back, I think, Andrew, to what Ryan was saying earlier, that like players were just happy that it made sort of the fights happen in different parts of the board, and it brought them to make sort of movements and engage in different, again, parts of the board that they don't normally do. So that what your comment speaks to, that even if the points themselves didn't amount to much, like it nonetheless impacted the overall dynamic of the game.
100%.
Yeah, I sort of had a similar experience. So of course, I really enjoyed the baggage train because we've covered it's super thematic. It's cool to have your baggage train, and like I think it's the best secondary. But it's something you need to think about. I think when you're list building is how you're going to handle this specific secondary. Well, you need to think about all of them, frankly. But in this one, you need like dedicated units to seize it, and then both myself and my opponent didn't really have an army that was fast enough to realistically be in a position to arrive, because you got to arrive at the baggage train turn 5 to score it on turn 6, basically, like to destroy it. So yeah, that was it was hard for us to actually interact with each other's baggage trains. He did have Chris did have a unit of Felbass, which had enough unit strength to sort of break my train, which forced me to be to keep some units behind to lock it up. But yeah, nonetheless, anyways, this one isn't one of my other thoughts is obviously the baggage train isn't limited to core units scoring it. So it's possible it gives new life to things like ambushers or other fast moving skirmishy type models to just go around and or come in from the back as far as ambushes are concerned to threaten the baggage train or yeah, threaten or capture it or whatever there, and that gives you an addition, as I mentioned, additional thing to think about during list building. And then this is perhaps a little gamey thing, but what I did in my game is first thing is we were doing player place terrain. I put a building, an impassable piece of terrain on sort of what I thought was going to be my end of the board, and then I just hid my baggage train right up next to it so that it was super difficult to get to. And yeah, that worked out super well. My opponent never got close to the baggage train all game, so just something to think about if you're placing your terrain too. Yeah, and that covers that one. Ryan, you want to go for chance encounter mixed up with domination?
Absolutely. So yeah, this is the table quarters deployment with the table quarters secondary. Just as a note, later I will cover things I would potentially change in the future. I just
Yeah.
didn't want to mix it up into this. So this is the mission where 64% of game results were determined by the secondary, but only 18% of wins were determined by the secondary. So this was the most impactful secondary out of all of them, with people getting an average of 500 points as the winner on secondary. Um, so, and again, the average score was a 5-1 as well. So this one was certainly interesting. It was actually exceedingly rare for one player to dominate the secondary. Actually, only only 3 out of 11 games saw one player completely block out the other player from scoring any table quarter points.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I love the deployment. It's long story short, there's a mission in Flames of War called Dust Up that has the exact same deployment, and it's just a great time. And it's just super interesting in Warhammer because I think people aren't particularly used to table quarters fighting.
No, you're
Uh,
right.
but anyway, it was an enjoyable mission, and it certainly had the most it was the most impactful mission. But again, you were still winning by killing your opponent. Table quarters was just, determining
The
which of those
degree of
brackets you were sitting in.
yeah, cool, good stuff. Andrew, what were your thoughts on chance encounter and domination together?
I think it was good. I think it's a good combo, especially with the weird deployment to begin with. You're already thinking table quarters even going into that match. Um, in our game, I'm unfortunately we kind of ran over time, so we only really got to the beginning of turn 5. I think if we managed our time a little bit better and were able to play all 6 rounds, I think it would have had a bigger impact. But going into that sort of top of turn 5, we were already pretty evenly matched in terms of killing each other's units and stuff. We're almost tied going into
Yeah.
that. Um, And then we kind of just talked out like, okay, even like the last 2 rounds, like even if we didn't kill each other's stuff, like how would we move our units to lock down those
Those
corridors?
quarters.
So we kind of just figured like, okay, like I think it still kind of worked out in his favor in one quarter, but like basically we were tied on table quarter controlling except for that one quarter. Um, and it would have been, I guess, a little bit more interesting if we were actually able to play like that fifth and sixth round.
Sure.
Just to see like the actuality of like what we kind of discussed, because there was a few combats that could have gone like either way depending on, dice rolls and shit like that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so our game, my second round was a tie just because we were already like super tight on kill points, and then like table quarters like realistically could have gone either way depending on how those sort of combats like played out. But again, I think even like with us talking it out, we were already like 10 minutes over time. And I know Ryan was kind of pushing us to finish, so we kind of just like, well, what do you think would happen with like table quarters and blah blah blah.
Sure.
So yeah, it's hard for me to say like I think it's a good combo, like those two, like primary and secondaries, just because of the weird deployment plus you're already thinking table quarters. I think that's a good way to do it, but it's hard for me to say like based on my game, if it was
Yeah. Yeah.
actually good.
Fair. Okay, yeah. So on my end, first of all, I think Chance Encounter is a really fun mission. The restricted deployment area is really something you need to approach carefully. Both myself and my opponent, which was Hutch in this case, had like big blocks. So I had 3 units of about 40 hobgoblins, and he had 2 big infantry blocks. Like we both found our deployment to be challenging because like all our units were getting in each other's way there. And then I think player place terrain becomes incredibly important in this mission because there's not enough terrain on the whole board or like half the board to really lock things up. But and with player place terrain in a quarter of the board, you can really screw with your opponent by like chucking impassable terrain in their deployment area, or if you win the roll after there, but like chucking impassable terrain in deployment areas and then just making it hard for people to leave their end of the board. So we both sort of did that. And I wound up sort of winning the role. So Hutch was like sort of hemmed in by like a house in the middle of his deployment area, which was annoying for him. And then like also he put his impassable herd stone right in the center of the board too, which like further screwed everyone. And then maybe ended up costing him that game because like half his armies ended up stuck behind the herd stone for quite a while. But yeah, so I think like placing terrain on this one is incredibly important also, just because you're so cramped up to start. I think domination, I think it pairs really well with this one. I like that the secondary is in 2/3 of the games essentially has an impact on the overall like differential with this mix of chance encounter and domination. And yeah, I think domination specifically, what it does for this mission is that it forces players to shake out and leave their deployment zones. Because if you give me a table quarter and I've got a shooting army, there's like a high potential that I just will castle up. And then domination has enough points at stake that they're just, it forces people to move out, and it keeps the game flowing and dynamic. So I think it's a really good mix of secondary and main and primary. Secondary and deployment, I should say. Cool. Let's go to the third game. King of the Hill, the infamous King of the Hill. Ryan, apparently the stats were not too bad though when it came to King of the Hill.
Yes. So King of the Hill, weird choice. So the only thing I did with this mission different was I made the hill like objective that's built into it. I just called it a secondary.
Sure.
Just for I didn't want to add anything else.
Yeah.
So this one, 40% of game results were determined by the hill, but only 10% of wins were determined by the hill. And you notice the percentages are cleaner now because there's only 10 games instead of 11.
Sure.
So, so yeah, with that said, the average points from secondary was again around 500. Really, the average points from primary was only like 1400, which is about the same as the first mission.
Interesting.
Um, and yeah, it's a lot of like quite frequently the person who won was scoring 400 to 700 points off of the hill. Again, there were only 2 instances where players actually like dominated the hill. But like the majority of games, people only had the hill for 50% of the game.
Yeah.
Like I've seen a lot of like 500, 600. So
Yeah. So
which is
they had it
super
by
interesting.
50. Yeah. Yeah. It is. And it means like they had it half the game and their opponent probably had it like a third of the game or something. And then that's just
Well,
help.
and like looking at it, like I'm seeing a lot of things where it's like held it for 5 turns and held it for 2 turns. So like I'd be real curious to actually see some of these games where it looks like one player dominated the hill later in the game
Yeah.
or like zoned out the hill but didn't necessarily have like that scoring core unit in the right position.
hmm Yeah. It's
Um,
it's
I
also like
I
a yeah. Go ahead.
I was just say I expect as people gain familiarity that those numbers will probably go up, but
Yeah.
because of how combat works as well, like if you're gonna fight over the hill, it's actually interesting because you just kind of start pushing each other back and forth, and that who is the closest starts to matter a lot.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
mission was also quite well received. I think the only thing that people weren't expecting was like the mission restricts you from Vanguard, but doesn't stop you from scouting directly onto the hill, as Andrew can talk about in a couple minutes.
Yeah. That's a good segue. Andrew, how did your hill game go?
So it went weird, if that's the correct way to describe it. So I definitely won my game because of I was able to scout on top of the hill. And just from turn 1 till I think again my my opponent lost a couple big combats sort of just before turn 5, so he ended up tapping out going into that. But definitely my control of the hill is what won me the game because even like up until that point, again, it was the demon player. Um, it like I wasn't really winning a lot of combats or taking units out. It was just because I kept generating those 200 points every turn that I was like getting big leads sort of by that midpoint of the game. Um, Even if we played it out, like I eventually killed sort of his general, which was a great unclean one, and then I broke or destroyed his sort of big main core block, which was like a big block of plague bearers with a herald on a planquin. Um, but that took me up until that turn to win those combats, and at that point, my army was very much depleted. My characters were like hanging on by one wound. So I think what he had left maybe could have done a half decent cleanup job and got like a bunch of points off me at that point in the round in the
hmm
game. But he was just like, yeah, like my main things are gone. You're already up. Like at that point, it was like 800 points at the end of turn 4, just from the hill, plus the stuff I already killed. He's like, it was a good game, whatever, but like, I don't see the point of playing on. Um, so I think it maybe if we played out like the full 6 rounds, I think maybe it would have been slightly closer, but again, I was still up 800 points on top of whatever he was going to get off of me. So I
Yeah.
think that very much dictated sort of the outcome of how that game was going to go. But at the same time, like I understand where our match was kind of the outlier, given those two, the primary and secondary put together. Um, I was able to skate on the hill turn one. I got turn one, so I was already scoring right away, and then immediately I was pushing up my main core unit. So I had two units of Dark Riders who scouted on the hill like turn one or
Yeah.
before turn one, I guess.
Yeah.
So by the end of turn one, they were already leaving the hill, and the unit was like the big, huge block of witches moving up on that hill. And that unit is my main damage dealer in my army. It had the hag with the cauldron, who is just ridiculous to fucking deal with. If you can, like, she puts out a ton of damage. She has rerolls on hits usually with her hatred. So unless you can deal with her specifically, like, that's a very like fucked up unit to have to like deal with as an opponent unless you have specific tools to do so.
Sure.
And he didn't have those things. So like it was very much a struggle for him to deal with that witch block. And then I think he pushed a little too hard into the witch block with some of his stuff that wasn't really equipped to do it, which kept me on the hill because that is a frenzied unit. So he could have like potentially charge baited them off of the hill so he can like kind of swoop in behind them. But he like I sat on top of the hill with my witches, and then he kind of just rushed at me. So it's like, cool, this is where I want to be. This is where I want the fights to happen because I'm already on the hill with my main like core block, and you're just kind of feeding me stuff that I can easily deal with.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, just the secondary definitely won me that game just because he was like very, like I said earlier, like very lucky with those ward saves and regen saves because of the Nurgle stuff. But even then, like, I think by turn 5 or whenever we kind of called it quits, like, it was pretty clear how this was going to go.
Fair. Yeah, I had the same situation as you, Andrew, and then I was able to take the hill super early and just hang on to it for the whole game. So for my final game, I paired into Frank and like the gunliniest of gun lines, which was really bad news for my like monster focused Chaos Dwarf army, which is high toughness but very limited amount of saves. So he had 6 cannons, 3 hellblasters, and like 2 mortars. And then the mission turned for me anyways, the mission turned into like to be a real lifesaver. So turn 1, I won the priority roll despite him having hands and stuff. And deploying first. So anyways, I managed to still win it. So start of turn 1, I moved like 120 unit strength worth of hobgoblins onto and around the central hill. So there was like no way that he was ever going to score any points on it. And then I used the hill because I also placed another hill because it was player placed terrain there in the center of the board to basically provide cover and defense and hide from cannons. And then the 2 hills, essentially, because of their points and their ability to hide from the cannons, just basically won me the game. The mission itself worked out pretty well. But unfortunately, the pairing made it just difficult for my opponent to actually play the mission. I think this mission specifically really disadvantages gun lines. Like if you bring a gun line to an event, and the hill's likely to come up, like you're going to be in a tough spot to win that game because you're giving up potentially 1,200 points to your opponent, which is just brutal to recover, potentially like unrecoverable from. And then your opponent also gets a massive line of sight blocking element right in the center of the board, and you can also be behind the hill and still score it because it's like 9 from the center, I think. So depending on how big your hill is, I guess. So that also just makes it harder for like gun lines. In my game, it didn't feel like my original concern is that the hill was so many points before like I played it in an event context and tried it out and stuff. Like it didn't feel too mosh pity because as a result of the pairing, like my opponent just had nothing to throw sort of on top of the hill to fight me. So that didn't happen, and all the fighting happened on his end of the board, where I sort of ran him down and stuff. I still feel like 1,200 points is too much, though. I think I would much prefer if it was 50 points per player turn. So for like with 600 points up for grabs, just because if you have a like if the armies match up poorly on this board, it's really hard. Like at times the old world can feel rock paper scissorsy when you have a bad matchup, but when you have that bad matchup on top of like a secondary that advantages your opponent for up to 1,200 points, I feel like it's just too much. However, Ryan's stats are indicating that the scoring wasn't anywhere as bad as I anticipated it would be. So yeah, I guess whatever then. I guess it's fine as it is. Yeah, it was a lot of stuff. So moving on from those three matches, like just based on what you've seen, starting with Ryan there, like are you thinking of making any changes to the let's call it the pairings of primary mission and secondaries before CCBB, or do you think you'll keep it as is?
So before Bloodbath, no, like
Well,
it's a
for
month.
Bloodbath, yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, it's a month. It's a month out, so like I don't want to mess around with the event pack. Plus, I want to gather another round of data, and
Yeah.
none of these missions like were like broken out the gate. So
Nope.
we'll stick with that. With that said, right now, pending more information, um, I do have some tweaks I would consider doing. Um, and in like no particular order. The hill is a funny one. One, and no, like I don't want to impose anything on Andrew, but I do think ideally the the hill itself needs to either be 18 inches in diameter so that you can only score by physically being on it and
Yeah.
therefore shootable. Um,
What? You gonna make
or
me
it,
make a bunch of hills?
I just said don't do that. We'll live with
Gee,
what we have. But at
that's
the end of the
fine.
day, like Kevin's particular situation in that last game where he could sit there collecting points and being untouchable is not ideal.
No.
Um, but again, I'm in no way asking Andrew to go make 25 18-inch diameter hills.
Sure.
Um,
I
so
mean, you know
don't
I'll
don't do
do
that.
it. So like whatever, but
Uh,
next year.
So there's that. Um, and given that like I don't want to start mucking around with like house ruling the missions too hard. The other thing that we've discussed would be for something like the hill again to have another outlet would be to either add um, baggage train or domination.
Okay.
So basically, it's in like yes, the hill can be a runaway train, but if you add domination,
Yeah, it
then
balances out. Yeah.
there's another 1,000 points up for grabs by a different vector. Um, so that was one solution anyway. Um, but we're looking at it. We'll see what kind of comes out once the other missions are also trialed.
Yeah.
And then looking at we got Hill and then the table quarters one. Again, tracking what I said before about the logistical problems. I want to add special feature back into that one. I know it doesn't add a ton of points, but it makes the game about 5 elements of the board for table quarters and the center.
Hmm.
Um, which I feel like just kind of balances things out a little bit.
Yeah.
Plus, having a 6-inch diameter or up to 6-inch diameter impassable line of sight blocking object in the center of the table, again, mucks around with those. I set up my gun line on the semicircle and then just shoot you, which is what
Yeah.
I did to Danny. Um, so, um, and then the first mission, the one that was just open battle with baggage train, um, like I don't want to add so much that we enter that we enter a space where secondaries are winning the game.
Hmm.
But in that one, like baggage train was so inconsequential that as long as you could commit something to credibly defend your baggage train, you could legitimately ignore the other player's baggage train and just
Yeah.
play open battle. Um, so anyway,
Yeah.
we're fiddling around with it, but it might wind up being that like we only have 5 missions and there's just one that's like the 3 objective and baggage train one. But I don't know. Haven't quite figured it out yet.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean it's not the end of the world if one out of the 5 or 6, because it's a six rounder at Bloodbath,
Yeah.
ends up being like the secondary is not too impactful in this one, right? Like,
So we're just
yeah,
that in Danny and I's talks, we were just trying to smooth out the curve a little bit.
sure,
So
yeah,
like having one mission with 1,200 extra points and one mission with 350 extra points is like a really big delta.
yeah,
Um, so that's all. We were just trying to see if we could maybe bring that bottom up a little bit, just so. But at the end of the day, like I've said this repeatedly, is ideally if I make 6 missions and your army is kind of screwed by one of them and is, like really good at one of them and then kind of okay at the others. But if you build a different army, it changes which missions those are. That's kind of my goal. Like
fair.
I don't I don't want any one thing to just be good at all 6 things without adapting.
Yeah, that
Um,
makes sense.
what do you
Yeah,
guys
that
think?
yeah, I think that's a good design philosophy, anyways. To make sure that nobody's a clear cut winner based on all the missions you make. Andrew, just because you're also involved in CCBB, obviously organization, like any changes you want to see to the pack before? Are you happy with how it went this weekend, and you're down to run it as is? Like, what are your thoughts?
So I will say I'm down to run it as is. I think this is the way Ryan has set it up is 100% functional for any sort of type of event. I think it's going to go well. Um, there are maybe a few minor tweaks I'd like to do. Um, mainly so like alluded to on the King of the Hill mission, maybe we should have another secondary, so either baggage train or table quarters, just to give another outlet to score points, just in case you are in a matchup where one army is very much suited to control that hill where your opponent isn't, or vice versa.
Hmm.
um so I think that would be a little bit better, because again, based on my experience with that mission, it's very easy to get a runaway sort of score.
Yeah,
um and even though the data from the whole event maybe doesn't dictate that, just based on my personal experience with that mission, um I feel like it kind of needs that extra little bit to make sure it isn't a blowout. um and as much as I think the first mission, which was sort of, it was just baggage train with like traditional 12-foot deployment zones. Um, I feel the secondary wasn't that big of a factor in like the outcomes of those games, maybe if we use one of the other sort of weirder deployments with Begatrain in conjunction, I think that might work a little bit better. But that's kind of just me off the cuff without actually looking at the data.
Yeah, that
Spitballing
makes
like
sense.
ideas.
Oh no, that makes sense.
Uh,
And I think you're lining up with Ryan pretty well, who's thinking of the pairings of missions with secondaries as like the method to change things here. So
yeah, and the other thing, like I haven't brought this up before, even to Ryan. When we talk, a decent amount about these things. Um, maybe it like if it is like a 5 or 6 round event, I know by the end of the last round on the last day of like a 2-dayer, do we really need secondaries at all? What if we just did pitch battle, fucking go at each other? So it still gives room for like some of those armies who are not super made up to play for secondaries. Just like let's have our one game where it is just we throw our armies at each other and see how it goes. No fancy deployments, no secondaries. Like let's just do that thing. So like the first, if it's a 5 round event, um, the first 4 rounds, have their secondaries, have their weird deployments. But then like again, last round, last day is just we rock up 12-foot deployment zones. Let's just play a game out of the big rule book as opposed to match play. But again,
sure.
that's not something I think will change for CCBB at all. I think we're locked in. Player pack is out. Everyone can look at it. So that's maybe something to look at for next year, unless like there's some kind of major FAQ again or something that changes the game. I think maybe we can look at that just to give that last round of the event sort of like the easy, don't think about anything. Let's just play some out of the book Warhammer.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're not far from that experience if you're doing Upon Fields of Glory or the baggage train, but yeah, that's fine. Cool. Let's pivot now to the second big segment here, the big summer preview that we had just over a week ago. So before we get into like the nitty gritty details, how did you find the preview as a whole? Starting with Andrew, was it more or less stuff than you were expecting to see?
I think it was um less of I don't know. In my head, I hype myself up for these events, so I
Sure.
expect like crazy big things, and then when it actually happens, I'm like, it's kind of not what I expected in my head. But I think it's still like a big deal. I think there's a lot of good stuff showing off. Um, so I think overall, like it was like really good. It's just like at the time when I was, kind of watching it take place. And I was at work at the time, so I was kind of doing like a big deal kind of menu tasting showing as like all this stuff was happening. So I was kind of like working as well as like checking my phone every 5 minutes. Um, I guess I was a little bit disappointed at the time, but like actually reflecting on it after the fact and like after I got home from work, I'm like, there's a lot of cool shit here. Um, Not just specifically like old world, but like, you know,
Yeah.
the Chaos Wars coming out for AOS. Like that's a really big deal. And
Yeah.
I think in our group chat I kind of reflected and said like I was a little bit disappointed by the Chaos Dwarves, but I think I also had some realistic expectations of what that army should have been to begin with. But like looking back on it, like sort of taking like a week or so to reflect on it, I still think that's a kind of a big deal, a big release. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Like I agree with you on a lot of this stuff. So I'm just going to jump in now because unfortunately Ryan had to leave us. But yeah, it was. I agree with you. I think there's a few big ticket items that were sort of presented at this preview. For me, it was bigger than I expected, specifically on the old world side of the house. I think like most people, I was expecting to see the Chaos Dwarves show up, so that wasn't like a huge surprise. But for the old world, like I wasn't expecting the Tomb Kings at all. I wasn't expecting
Yeah.
as much stuff as we got like on the second Arcane Journal for it was the War of Cetra's Fury or whatever. So yeah, I think I'm very happy. And then like the reimagined Chaos Dwarfs, we'll talk about it here in a few minutes, but like that's also massive. Like it's my army. It's like the biggest collection of models I own. So yeah, it's that was a big deal for me too. So. Okay, let's start off with the new models for Tomb Kings. So Tomb Kings had an updated Royal Heralds on foot and mounted, as well as Lich Priests on foot and mounted. Andrew, what do you think of the updated sculpts?
Um, I so this is one where I'm kind of like disappointed because it's very much moving into that more modern GW style of like unit design or model design. So
Okay,
um it's very busy, and I think it's moving away from that sort of classic Tomb King design of like where the characters have a lot of those mummy bandages. So there's
sure.
a lot less of that on those models. I think they're beautiful. I think they look amazing, but like I think when you combine those newer units with like the classic Tomb King sculpts, there's gonna be, unless your like paint job's really good, I think there's gonna be kind of like a visual
Yeah,
design style that differentiates it a bit. I'm not saying it's bad because again, those models are great. And the main thing about those two kits, I think that's kind of what it's gonna be. It's like gonna be like a single kit with a
it
foot
is.
character
Yeah,
with associated mount. Like back in eighth, like I only ever played eighth ed, but like back in eighth, like those like kind of combo character kits where you buy the kit and you got your foot version and your mounted version, like those were so great. There were so
yeah,
many options. There was so much like good, like even bits if you didn't use it for those two models, like you can spread it amongst the army. Like seeing that type of design space from the studio come back, like I think that's amazing. I really love those kits, and I wish they did more of those back in the day for like all the different armies
yeah,
to see them do that for Tomb Kings and hopefully like going forward with a bunch of other armies, like I think that's awesome. I really love seeing those like types of kits come back. Um
yeah,
so yeah, like I know I started this off kind of negative, but I still think like these are awesome models. These are awesome kits to come out. It's just I'm kind of worried that the newer with the older design styles aren't gonna like mesh up nicely on the table. That's kind of like my only
yeah.
downside, but mostly like my opinion of it is like 100% positive. Like I think it's great.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. Like, of course, it's going to clash visually. Like, Tomb Kings has some pretty derpy sculpts in it. Like the old skeletons are, yeah, they've had
They're
a
rough.
long
They're rough.
life, and they're yeah, they're probably ready for retirement at this point. So yeah, that will clash. I think listeners know how I feel towards Tomb Kings. So my first initial reaction was a bit of a groan, but like, jokes aside, I think these are cool sculpts. Like, I really like them. I think in particular, like the Lich Priests replace some pretty derpy old models, so that's great. I really really like the Herald on horse. He's got like this kind of the famous sort of painting of Napoleon pose going. And I'm there for it. I think that guy looks great. Um, in particular, and as with like everything that I'm seeing in terms of all the new sculpts that they've done for the old world, like I'm just really excited to see more updated kits or just new kits come out. These are massive glow ups over what existed before, although you're like to the point where they'll clash with your old collection, as Andrew was pointing out. And it's just great to see like the old fantasy setting reimagined in 2025 with modern sculpting and stuff. So I think these are slam dunks for me. The Lich Priest on, yeah, no, they're all good. I just particularly like the Herald on horse. Um, and I think this one was like a bonus reveal for me. I wasn't expecting this at all, as I mentioned, like in my opening remarks. And as with you, Ryan, I'm really happy that they went with the two models in one box Formula 2, just because it gives you options. Like, what's to say that this, like this guy, like the herald on horse isn't suddenly a prince or what have you. Like you can play around with these models. You can convert just based on what's in the box, and as you said, Andrew, you can spread these models around your army too and do other things. So I'm just really happy that they went for that formula. They also did it with Cathay, where I think there's like a mounted and a foot gate masters, I believe, in the same box. So like it's they seem to
the
be
BSB level model, right?
yeah, exactly. So like it feels like they're just heading down that path now, and it's cool that like the Tomb Kings get it twice between the Lich Priests and the Heralds too. So it's all good stuff.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, now let's go to the next one, which for me is the big reveal of the show, the one I'm most excited to talk about. Like the next Arcane Journal is going to be called The War of Cetra's Fury. It covers Cetra's full-blown invasion through the Border Princes and into the mountain chain that's called the Vaults. Like on the show, they said it's south of Bretonnia and the Empire. I think it's really south of Athel Loren if you look at a map, but that's neither here nor there. There are some pretty wild mentions in the article. They said, for instance, that there are plenty more arcane journals over the next few months, and various armies of infamy are in this one. So, yeah. Before I turn it over to you, Andrew, let's like scope this a little bit more here. So, more specifically, there's mention of like new rules for Tomb King mounts. So they get barded skeletal steeds, as well as incantations for the the mortuary cult. Do you have any idea on this? Like, what do you think these like Tomb King specific items entail, Andrew?
Honestly, I don't know. So I know like a friend of the podcast, Danny McDonald, he had brought up in our sort of group chat going on that like incantations were like specific sort of bound spells that existed, I think in 6th edition,
Yeah,
during the Storm of Chaos campaign, uh, for Tomb Kings. I'm sure people listening, I probably got this wrong somewhere along the line. People are going to be mad, but like that's kind of the general gist. Whereas kind of like just like bound spells you can buy for, um, Lich Priest or Tomb Priest or whatever.
yeah,
Um, so that's interesting, and I like that it's not specifically a new army of infamy. It's like just kind of like add-ons for a thing you can buy. I think that's an interesting design space,
yeah,
especially in conjunction with like the potential campaign that's coming with it. Um, but it's also like this whole arcane journal with all like the weird details that we'll go into later. I think it's kind of what we've generally alluded to or suspected what was going to come from the arcane journal system going forward after like the main armies are released, which it'll
yeah,
be it's going to be a campaign system. There'll be like little add-on things or like additional armies of infamy for a bunch of different armies, not just like here's your Tomb King arcane journal for this campaign. Like it's gonna be like closer, I think, to the Middle Earth games campaign book system where it's like here's a campaign based on like this event or this thing in Lord of the Rings, and here's the armies that took part. Here's some additional stuff you can add to your armies, but it's not specifically like here's a whole new actual army.
yeah. Yep, that makes sense. I have a few thoughts on the Tomb King specific stuff. Like, first of all, they talked about barded steeds. Cool, I guess. Enjoy that extra armor to go along with your improved regen saves, Tomb Kings players, I guess. So cool. That not too much to say on that one. There's a lot of talk online. I think this one is more rumors and facts there, but there's a lot of talk online about snakes as potential character mounts too. Yeah, I think it's probably wishful thinking, but I'm there for dudes surfing on giant cobras, regardless of if it's wishful thinking or not. And then for the incantations of the mortuary cults, the only thing I'd add, I think, to what you said, Andrew, is I believe that they're not. You can't dispel them because they're not actually spells, or that's how they were played in the past, anyways. I don't think they're. I think they would bring them back in that fashion, because between bound spells and regular spells, just having items that give spells, like, is, I don't think that's enough to warrant their inclusion. So I think it's like undispellable type spells. So yeah, I think that sounds like fun. Just what we needed after casting was nerfed in mortuary cults is for them to get more undispellable casting. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But it's interesting that they're exploring new sort of ideas with it. So like I'm cautiously optimistic. We'll see. That's fine. So yeah. Then Andrew, the first new Army of Infamy that is specifically mentioned is one they told us they were not going to do because it was too obvious when the Dwarf book came out, and that's Dwarven Slayers. Any thoughts on what's coming with Dwarven Slayers? What rules we're looking at? What units could come back or be included? That kind of stuff.
I think this is great. I think this is something people have wanted, again,
Yeah.
since 6th edition. Even back like during my 8th ed days, like people tried to recreate a Dwarven Slayer list out of like the basic generic list. It never really did well, but like it was always something people had a lot of enthusiasm for. So I think it's cool that they're actually giving people what they want and making this cool list that's going to be themed around Slayers, um, without kind of like backdooring it in on the,
Yeah.
I want to say
Royal
Royal Host.
Clans.
That's
It's Royal
Royal
Clans.
Clans. That's it. I knew Royal was in there. List using the specific character for it. So
Ungrim.
being
Yeah.
yeah, so being able to do it with, I guess, hopefully, again, I'm just guessing, but like generic, like Dwarf Lords, Dwarf King, or Thanes, without having to take that specific Ungrim character. Um, it's going to be cool. Potentially, it also allows them to bring in a lot more Slayer specific rules for that Army of Infamy. And then, I think we've kind of gotten everything in those previous arcane journals for dwarves, um, for Slayer specific units. So like the only thing like left out is maybe um, the pirate slayers.
Yeah.
So that
Long
can
drongs. Yeah.
pretend that's at long draws. I want to say Ungrim again, but I knew it wasn't right. So like potentially we'll see like the pirate slayers come back as either a mercenary unit or just something you can add into like the base list as a like a special or something.
Mhm.
So I think that's cool. Potentially can give them like some range attacks if they have like pirate pistols or something. Um, but I think that's just really cool design space. Maybe they'll come out with like, you know, they've already released kind of what we expect of all the old models. So maybe they will actually just come up with a new unit for like the specific Army of Infamy.
Sure.
Maybe that's a little bit too much wishful thinking. But we're kind of on uncharted territory now. So like depending on what they decide to do for this army.
Yep, and
Um,
I think you may be onto something there, because like right now we're 18 months out, so they would have like, we're getting closer to a point where they would have seen the initial success of the game and then have had time to start kicking things out through the studio to like for releases. So
yeah,
like
100%.
it's tough to do 2 or 3 months after the game launches, but like a year and a half out, 2 years out, like you're starting to have time to develop things. So
Well,
um,
especially with like the Tomb King characters, like I don't
yeah,
think that was an initial release. Given like they were like day one
yeah,
releases for Old World, I don't think that was ever planned
I think you're right.
beforehand.
Yeah. I think you're right, because they would have released it with that, like that was the flagship release, right? To kick off the game. If they
Yeah,
had those kicking
100%.
around, they would have released them. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So I think we're getting on that like outer edge of what they've had planned.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Especially like
yeah, go ahead.
if we take their word for it, like again, Old World's performing a little better than they expected, or a lot better, whatever.
Yeah.
I think maybe they are kind of pushing more internal resources onto this game and seeing what they can do to push sales and whatever. So
Yep.
I think we might actually see some like cooler, nicer shit going forward, just because I think it's performing a little better than they ever expected for sure.
Agreed. Fully agreed. Just going back to Slayers here for a second. So I'm very interested to see how this one plays out. So I think like specifically how they make the Slayer Army of Infamy distinct from like the almost Slayer Army of Infamy that's in Royal Clans
Yeah.
if you take Ungrim is going to be really interesting. I'm afraid that it won't be different enough, but we'll see there. Like it also because it also feels to me that if I was running a Slayer army, having increased runic allocation, having the tattoos, and then having increased strength that comes with like on your models that comes from royal clans are all just effective tools to help a Slayer list. So I'm not sure what you replace this with in the actual Slayer army. So we'll have to see what that sort of that is. I think the biggest problem with the Slayer list is that like Slayers themselves just kind of suck. So yeah, I'm not sure how you address that without changing Slayers entirely, which they don't do in the Arcane Journals. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how they skin this cat because it feels like there's like a few landmines in their way between the units making it up being not that great and then them having an like almost having this army of infamy elsewhere. So we'll see. I think if you want to like do a Slayer army that works, I think they need like a cheaper unit than like base Slayers, potentially like Slayer Initiates or something, or call them whatever you want. They're just like a something you can kit bash, just to give you some variety and have like a unit type that can play the mission well. I think you also need more variety than what's currently available in the Slayer Force. Like when I was thinking about it, I thought that like having an upgrade you could apply to your characters, like a Slayer Oath upgrade, that you could pay for to basically be able to take engineers, runesmiths, or longbeards, whatever type of unit you want in the Slayer army, just like those guys that have recently taken the oath. You lose some rules, you gain some associated with Slayers would be just like a great way to run with this and to give the Army of Infamy some legs to stand on. And then in terms of units that are likely to make a comeback, Andrew, you hit like the first one for sure for me is Slayer Pirates. Whether they're called Long Drawns or something else, because he's not, well, he's probably boring because dwarfs lived for a while there, but like he's not prominent at that point. But like not bringing back those models would be like an incredible miss. People
That'd be
love
a
the Slayer
sin.
Pirates. Yeah, people love the Slayer Pirates. There's so much nostalgia for them. They're just a really cool concept. So if they don't make a comeback, a lot of people will probably just riot at Games Workshop headquarters. The other unit I think that's going to make a comeback is like the Brotherhood of Grimnir, which is just a very, very elite unit of Slayers. And I think you kind of need something like that if you're going to make an army out of Slayers, because right now between base Slayers, I know they get like an upgrade that you can have, and there's a demon. No, it's not demon. Anyways, there's like two tiers of Slayers, but they're like all in the same unit. Having another unit that like elite that you could slot on top of them between them and the characters feels required. So yeah, I'm predicting 2. I think the Brotherhood of Grimnir.
I don't know about
Yeah.
that though.
No.
Like,
Okay.
because they can always just. I mean, you're not wrong, but they can also just do kind of like blanket upgrades. So it's like, okay,
Sure.
units in this army, everything has hatred, or everything has a 5-up, ward or whatever. Like that'd
Sure.
be potentially enough to bump them into that sort of playable bracket.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think you are probably going down the right path, but like realistically speaking, like they could just kind of do like blanket upgrades for the whole army, just in like the base army of
They could.
infantry rules, right?
Yeah, they could. And we know like there are some armies of infamy that rock because of the rules that they have, and some others that just don't, right? And or that are like hamstrung by the rules, and that are carried by their models. Like there's all kinds of varieties of armies of infamy for sure. So yeah, so I'm hoping, and I think we'll have 2 new units: the Brotherhood of Grimnir, and then like Slayer Pirates in some form. And then I hope that they have like a more chaffy type unit, like I called them Slayer Initiates earlier, but like just something like that to help out. But yeah, I'm super interested to see how they skin this cat, because they've almost walked onto this territory already. So yeah, we'll see. Cool. Now, Andrew, the second army of infamy that was mentioned is the Border Princes. So, any thoughts from you on what's coming with the Border Princes? Like, what types? How do you see this army being built? Like, what rules or units could we be looking at? And most importantly, perhaps I think for our listeners, do you think that this is the Talea Dogs of War army that was rumored? Because there is some talk about that online, or do you think it's something else?
Yeah. So it wasn't with you, but it was with something else I was talking online with. Um, so I think this is gonna be some kind of weird um Empire and Bretonian mix-up army with
Yeah,
potentially um some like Border Princess specific units that they either release or re-release from Dogs of War. Um and it's going to be very basic in this book. Um, but like based on my conversation with this person online, and it's just a buddy of mine. It's not like they have any sort of,
yeah. This is not a
inside
source.
it.
Like it's
Yeah, this is not a source. It's just kind of like just us shooting the shit and like thinking about it. Um, it could put so based on how they released Cathay, um, and then how like Cathay is going to get a second army or arcane journal specific kind of book that like expands their options. I kind of feel this might be like a Dogs of War pre-release type list where it's like they'll introduce a couple new units that will be in the overall Dogs of War army, but like this is just kind of their way to get it into the game or like re-release those model kits in some fashion, and then later on we might see a full-on Dogs of War release.
sure.
Again, this is all speculation on like me and my kind of buddy's part, just based on like the conversation we had. But I don't think it's like for a long time we've heard rumors of like a full-on like you're gonna get Dogs of War. It's gonna have like all the fucking old units. It's gonna be awesome. I don't think we're gonna get that right off the bat, but I feel like this is kind of like a soft launch into that potential release future down the
Okay.
road where we'll have, like it'll be like you build your army basically like Empire and Bretonians, and then maybe we'll put out pikemen or like something else like from those original Dogs of War lists, and then eventually down the road that now that those kits are out, then we'll see like a full on proper Dogs of War release. Um,
Sure.
Either way, I'm excited because like this is kind of like that doorway into that. Um, Talea and Estelia are featured fairly heavily in like the lore for Old World and like in kind of like the stories leading up to where we're at this point.
Mhm.
So I think like somehow like it's gonna be part of that. It's just I'm not sure if it's like the full Dogs of War release that like we're kind of expecting to come out.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it is the full Dogs of War. Like, so yeah, first things first, this is the Army of Infamy out of the two that have been mentioned I'm most excited in. I think the Border Princes as a concept are just really cool. Like this sort of lawless border area filled with like a bunch of exiles and power hungry warlords and all kinds of weirdos from like the Warhammer world is just fantastic, and you can do something very cool with your army if you're theming it around the Border Princes. As you've talked about, Andrew, and as I asked in my question there, the elephant in the room is this the Southern Realms, Talea or whatever, their Dogs of War army, and have those rumors been mislabeled, and it is in fact the Border Princes that are being released. And the more I think about it, I come kind of to the same conclusion as you, Andrew, in that I don't think this is the rumored Talea army or what was talked about as Talea. Mainly because I want a Dogs of War Talea army, but secondly, and obviously more importantly, there's like an incredible amount of nostalgia in the community and community interest in a Dogs of War army, and it feels really disingenuous from GW's perspective to reveal it as like an army of infamy in a random narrative book without like even doing a faction reveal for it. Showing those kits that people love. Like you can't reintroduce, I don't know, the Birdman of Katraza without showing us the Birdman of Katraza in like the freaking review. Like that makes no sense. So to me, that like there's not enough. Like if they're introducing an entirely new army, as was the case with Cathay, for instance, like there's not enough buzz around this like this journal, this arcane journal, and just how they mentioned it for it to be like an entirely new army. Like that doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, so I guess I agree with you also, Andrew, and then some of the rumors we've seen online on this one, in that I think the Border Prince's Army of Infamy is going to be primarily a mix of Empire and Bretonnian units, with some like additional add-ons, like the Border Prince's Brigands, the Bombards, and the Outcast Wizards that are currently in the Bretonnian book and Exiles. You're also probably going to see like an expansion of those 3 unit entries with something else that's Border Prince themed. So I would think like a core infantry unit, like I don't know, call them Border Prince's Outlaws or something, and then like a unit of Border Prince's specific cavalry, and then I think you have like you have a list, supplement that with some random Empire and Bretonnian stuff, and I think you have a pretty solid list and an interesting army to sort of build around. I really also like, I've seen an idea online of like having your leader's origin, like the general's origin, unlock certain units and rules like from the different forces that then get slapped onto your army. So if like your Border Prince is a Bretonnian exile or an Empire exile or whatever, then you get different sort of things that you can build into your army, and I think that would be a really cool way to sort of to build your army and build this Army of Infamy. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I'm really excited to see how Border Princes shakes out, because I think it has a lot of very interesting narrative potential and a lot of like allowing you to build like an army of your dudes potential, which is always great. Cool. Any last minute thoughts on this one, or are you ready to move on?
No, I think you covered
Okay.
most of it.
Perfect. Okay, and then in the article they mentioned there are various armies of infamy in this sort of book. Various to me implies that there's more than the dwarven slayers and the border princes. So you want to take a stab, Andrew, at another army of infamy or other armies of infamy that you think are in this book?
Realistically, I don't know. So, like, if we're talking border princes, like maybe wood elves could be rolled into that because their
Sure.
main capital territory, whatever,
The
is
forest.
pretty close to that.
Yeah.
Also, orcs and goblins are very prominent in the border princes. That's kind of
Yeah.
like their main antagonist there
Yeah.
is those guys. Um those are kind of like the main major players outside of like Bretonnia Empire, Tomb Kings, which has already been stated. So I think like we might see some kind of mix of that. Um, Potentially high elves because they kind of have enclaves everywhere. So maybe there's something there wrapped up into it. Or we might just see like more campaign specific armies of infamy that like maybe don't branch outside of that specific campaign system
Sure.
and like maybe don't work in like a like kind of like our focus, which is more like tournament side oriented. Like maybe it doesn't translate out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more like just specific. So you might see like throughout the campaign, Bretonnians and whatever this Border Prince's Army of Infamy, like they act separately, but then towards the end of the campaign, like they become like a combined force, or I don't know, just like weird shit like that. Like
Yeah.
the specialist game studio, they're very good at doing campaign systems. The Forge World studio, we've seen Vrax, we've seen the whole Horus Heresy game system, and now that their focus is also on old world or like Warhammer Fantasy, like there's a lot of weird shit they can delve into that maybe doesn't work 100% in a tournament setting, but is really good for like narrative campaign play. So we
Yep.
might see something there, and just they'll make Armies of Infamy for that specific campaign that maybe doesn't translate well outside of that campaign, but really that's again me just kind of speculating.
Sure. No. That would be interesting. I was a little bit more grounded when I was thinking of these Armies of Infamy. Like I have two things that I think may show up in here. So for me, like this is a Tomb Kings focused arcane journal. I cannot see how there is no Tomb King focused Army of Infamy inside. Like I can't fathom a book called The War of Cetra's Fury without an Army of Infamy related to Tomb Kings. Like it doesn't make sense. So, I think perhaps a new character as like Cetra's general leading some portion of his force. I think a cool Army of Infamy that Tomb Kings don't really have. They have one that's like ostensibly chariot focused. Doesn't really play out like that on the tabletop, but they do have that. So I think an Army of Infamy with like a cavalry focus would be and like focus on the incantations to leverage the new rules would be cool, and it would also leverage the new mountain models that are coming out. So yeah, I think I'm going to say a cavalry. I know they have crappy cavalry, but like a cavalry focused Tomb King army is a like maybe you get mounted Tomb Guard. I don't know, but like just that kind of an idea would be cool. And then as a second, less likely bet, I'm going to go the same direction you went, Andrew, and say like to me, who resides in the vaults, which is where like Cetra's invasion is sort of headed towards, aside from dwarves, and for me that's night goblins. I've called it in our predictions show, border princes and night goblins, so I'm going to go with a night goblins and squigs themed Army of Infamy, and that one's super easy. Like they just need to re-release the colossal cave squig, which is amazing, and then the squig gaba, I think it's called, the artillery squig, like the squig artillery piece, and then you have like enough new stuff, and you could build a nice. And there's going to be a night goblin themed Army of Infamy at some point. This may just be the point.
That's just low hanging fruit right there, like a
Yeah,
night goblin army. So like, if it isn't this book, like probably eventually, like there's no way.
There's no way.
That.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to happen at some. It's like the Slayer army, right? Like it's such an obvious one. I think. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that closes out for Cetra's War of Vengeance. We have another Arcane Journal which now has a name, the Cathay one, which we knew about. It's called Dawn of the Storm Dragon. We don't have a ton of new information. We're not going to talk about all the stuff we already knew about it, but we do have. So the new information that we have is that like lore-wise, it builds off the Warriors of Chaos Arcane Journal, and that it details how Miao Ying has taken an expeditionary force to Westerland, which is where obviously Marienburg is, in order to beat back Friedel the Chainmaker's invasion. So the article explains that the warriors and heroes involved in the fight will be detailed specifically in the Army of Infamy and in the Army of Infamy, the Jade Fleet, and that the Jade Fleet is an alliance between Miao Ying and Westerland / Marienburg. With that in mind, Andrew, do you have any idea on rules or specific units that we could get out of this Army of Infamy?
Not so much. Like obviously, it'll be some kind of combination of Empire units with the Cathay units. They've already kind of said before that we're not going to see any new Cathay units specifically. So unless they do kind of like restatting of potential like units that already exist, and you just say like, oh, run them as is, like I don't think we're going to see anything out of there. So I think it's going to be more like a here's how you make Empire / Cathay into like one army, which a little bit disappointing, but I guess what is to be expected given they're probably still kind of testing the waters on how popular this new army is going to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think it's going to be like anything like crazy outside of kind of expectations of what we're given from that description.
Sure. So I decided to go for like for a crazy some crazy predictions here on this one. So I think
here we go.
in particular, I think the alliance between Miao Ying and specifically Westerland and Marienburg, like I think the connection there is going to be super important in the Army of Infamy. So I think that the Blades of Manan were super heavily part of the story in the Warriors of Chaos Arcane Journal, focusing on Westerland. And I think the Blades of Manan, like everybody was confused why they weren't in the Empire Arcane Journal. I think this is where they're coming back because of that alliance between Miao Ying and Westerland. So I'm predicting Blades of Manan are going to be in there. And then beyond, obvious Empire units being included in the Jade Fleet Army, like state troops and stuff like that, I think we're also going to see some Marienburger specific units in this Army of Infamy. So I'm calling it right now. It's coming back in remastered form. The Marienburg class landship, is coming back with this, and it's going to be amazing. I love me a good landship. It's super geographically focused on this Army of Infamy. So yeah, I think this is obvious for me. And then I think like probably some sort of unit of like Marienburger City Guard or Republican Guard or whatever, like just some buffed up state troop type unit, just to sort of round out the Jade Fleet Army. I think it's going to be like a Cathay character that they're going to bring in with this one, but I would really instead like to see a Marienburg themed character as part of this Army of Infamy. Like, this is the general in charge of the Marienburg or the Western Land Army type of guy being brought in, would be super cool. And then, for the rules, I'm not too sure. Like, seems to me like losing access to the winds, like the Cathayan winds, seems like a given, because they're so far away from Cathay and like the influence of the whatever it's called, the God Dragon and his wife there. But like, I'm not sure. I think they'll lose access to some of those very specific magic Cathay rules, but aside from that, I'm not too sure. But the landship, that's what I want to see out of this. Okay. So aside from the Army of Infamy, they also mentioned, like, they talked about stuff that we already knew. So the terrain generation rules, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. The article also mentions that this book, so Fury of the Storm Dragon, is going to have rules for linked battles or campaigns in them. What do you think this entails, Andrew, for the campaign system?
I think great things to be, to start off. But
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very similar to sort of the other campaign systems we've seen from like Age of Sigmar and 40K, where it's just kind of like a very basic set of rules on like how you can do link games, maybe branching paths on like, okay, if you win this game, you get this buff in your next game, or you might get like X amount of points extra going forward. I don't think it, as much as I want it to be some like kind of super robust like campaign system, like what I'm used to from, all my Necromunda experience.
Yeah.
I just don't see them going that deeply into like a army based game system like Old World. So I think it'll be very like light touch, kind of very simple, basic campaign play rules that doesn't go too deeply. As much as I'd like to see them kind of re-release, like, like Mighty Empire or something, that'd be amazing for me, but I don't think we're gonna see that, at least off of this release.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. So I hadn't even thought, but your example of like Crusade in 40K and Path to Glory in AOS is, I think, probably what we're going to end up with here. I'd love to see, like you, Andrew, a really in-depth, solid, well-built system. But I think that would need something like a match play guide, but specifically like the campaign play guide or whatever you want to call it, rather than sticking it inside an arcane journal. Because, in the arcane journal, they're only like 48 pages long, and you've got some lore in there. You've got an Army of Infamy. You've got some new unit entries. We know that this one has terrain generation rules. It's got occupiable buildings, etc. So there's just like not any room left in the book for a really robust campaign system. So I think it's going to be yeah. Go ahead.
Something like that would necessitate like its own almost dedicated
Exactly.
book to that. So
Exactly.
like
Right.
we're not going to get it in this for sure. It's going to be
Yeah.
something very like light touch basic.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's just going to be like some little thematic buffs and malices, like battlefield scars or whatever, that you carry over from a battle to a battle type situation, and like a way to grow your army between battles. That's basically it. So yeah, the Path to Glory Crusade example that you gave, I think, is bang on, Andrew. Okay, so the other big reveal for us is obviously Chaos Dwarfs are back. They're for AOS, so they're called now the Hellsmiths of Hashut. What are your thoughts, Andrew, on the line in general, the aesthetics, and reimagining Chaos Dwarfs overall?
I'm very much torn on this release. I think it's leading up to it, like I had hyped myself up to it being something that it was not, which I alluded to early in this episode.
Yeah,
And in my head, it was going to be kind of like a one-to-one release of stuff that can be used in Old World,
yeah,
which in hindsight was probably an unrealistic expectation on my part. Um, it's I think it's a good release. I think that the models in it are like excellent. There's a lot of character. I think they're perfect for Age of Sigmar, which is the game they're released for. I think kind of like my disappointment is it's not a perfect release for Old World, which is kind of my focus, the
yeah,
thing I wanted it for. But you know, giving it myself like a week to kind of reflect on it and look back at those models, like I think it's an awesome release. The models are super cool. There's a lot of like cool, thematic and characterful like models in there. Like it's gonna be great as an army for Old World. I think it again not the product that it's supposed to be for, but I think it kind of is a little bit too much of a step outside of the Old World aesthetic. Again, it's not made
yeah,
for that, so again, not a realistic expectation, but like I think it's serviceable enough to be like, hey, if I want to play Chaos Dwarves in Old World, 100% you can use almost all those models, if not all of them, other than the quote unquote Kadai Destroyer
yeah,
re-release. And it'll work fine. It's just the aesthetic is a little too high fantasy to work in Old World, I think, for me. And I know like
agreed.
other people may disagree. But if you grab those models and painted them up and modeled them for Old World, like I don't think it's gonna be super out of place. It's just a little not what I wanted. But if
Yeah,
I was an Age of Sigmar only player, I'd be super stoked. Like these are super cool models, very characterful. They got like their own like very distinct aesthetic that's like really nice and specific for that army. I think it's a great release. It's just because I'm not the target market for that release. I'm kind of a little bit disappointed because I've already like added my own like expectations for that release, which again isn't very realistic based on knowing what it was supposed to be for to begin with.
yeah. No, that makes sense, and like I think it also depends model to model, like kit to kit. Some of them are really, I think, aren't far off from the old world aesthetic, and some of them are super far off. But anyways, we'll get to that when we talk about aesthetics. So my like overall, I'm just super pumped that Chaos Dwarfs are back. Like it's my army. So let's go, let's bring them back. I'm very very happy to see them. Generally, I like the line. I like the new sculpts in general. They're not exactly my favorite Chaos Dwarf aesthetic. My favorite one is like the Tamarkan era Legion of Asgore aesthetic. So I really like that. But I don't hate the new kind, like the new look that they have going for them, like which is sort of a modernized high fantasy fusion between the fourth edition and the Forge World era Chaos Dwarves. So there's that. I think there's like a lot of visual design cues that are reminiscent of past Chaos Dwarf lines too. So, the just small things, right? Like the scale mail around the legs there on like this kind of a scale mailed robe or whatever. The pointy metal shoes, those are super common design is like aesthetic cues of the previous two lines of Chaos Dwarfs. The plated beards and the tusks are also very reminiscent of like Chaos Dwarfs in the old world. The little demonic flasks, which are like the little demonic flasks are like little grenades. There is also something that's popped up across like decades of Chaos Dwarfs, so that's cool. They have even like common names with past units and options and stuff. So like there's a lot of callbacks, enough for me to make this like not an entirely new thing, but like a growth on the old lines from before. In terms of the models, like I really, really like the I think he's called the War Despot, like the general, like the close combat general character. I think he would make a wicked seneschal or castellan in the old world. So I really like that guy. I really like the sorcerer too. I think he's great. I love the not Kadai destroyer. I think that guy's fantastic. I wish there was a use for him in the old world. So release those Kadai Destroyer rules at GW that you secretly worked on before you released the game. I love the new Bull Centaurs. Not so much like the upgraded version, the Anointed or whatever they're called there, but like the regular Bull Centaurs, I think are bang on. They'll fit really well in the old world too. I think the Hobgoblins are fantastic. They're very usable in the old world. So it's generally all good stuff. I think what's also cool at this is that there are some like let's say you want to collect Chaos Dwarfs in the old world. There are some options in this new line that were not available in the previous Forge World line. For example, the blunderbusses or great weapon bull centaurs. Like Forge World never made great weapon bull centaurs, but they are an option in the old world. And if you're taking bull centaurs, you're probably taking them with great weapons anyways. So that's cool that now exists. I'm not convinced about the Taurus, like being a literal mechanical bull. But I'm not entirely off put by it either. So whatever. I think having no Lamassu or Iron Demon is sad though for Chaos Dwarfs, or just if you're trying to collect this line in Old World. And I think so aesthetically for me, there's a few things that I'm not super on board with. Like the biggest miss for me is with a lot of the hats. I think the new hats that they have work really well when they've got horns. Like the Despot and the Sorcerer are really cool with those horn hats. But I think the hats without the horns look kind of weird. Like if you look at those Andrew, those blunderbuss guys that I sent you, or even the basic infantry, like they look like, I swear to God, there are some bad guys in the original Power Rangers that have hats like that. Like, like those are some wonky fucking hats for like, especially the blunderbuss guys. But I mean, aside from that, that's just nitpicky stuff. Like, I think they're generally super cool aesthetic stuff. So, yeah.
Again, like
yeah,
I think we're bringing in a lot of baggage
yeah.
from our own expectations or like previous iterations of the Chaos Dwarves, like in Old World or in Warhammer Fantasy. Whereas, like, as a standalone Age of Sigmar army, I think this is perfectly fine and perfectly good. It's just, I think we're expecting something more than it was ever intended to be out of like this release.
Agreed.
Like, I think if you're an Age of Sigmar player who was like kind of like interested in like, oh, what's the deal with these like Chaos Dwarves that keep getting kind of like half mentioned in the lore and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I think you're gonna be super happy with this release. I think it's just because of us we have that like, well, we're playing Old World, or I played Fantasy back in the day, so I already have like this preconceived notion of like what a Chaos Dwarf should be. I think that's where like kind of like our disappointment or trepidation with this release is coming from.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. And I think if I was like, it wouldn't be a far shift either. Like I think the bodies, like it's all perfect for me from an old world perspective. I think if you just do weapon swaps, and because some weapons look like, if you look at the War Despot, that glaive he's carrying, like that basically to me looks like a Necron weapon from 40k with all like the glowing like green runes
Like
in them and stuff,
the
and
weird T one.
yeah. You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
so
it's
I
kind
think
of
like
weird looking.
yeah, you just do like a weapon swap on him, and like he's perfectly fucking fine for old world. The like spears are not really an option in old world, so like the basic troops you just swap out like hands, and maybe if you want to swap out heads, but like thankfully these are the easiest conversions to make out of anything. So yeah, and some of them I think are just bang on old world aesthetic. Like those bull centaurs, like they just
Oh, they're
work.
perfect. They're
They're
perfect.
perfect, you know.
If you
The
don't
hot,
use that other head, like if you
yeah,
use like
exactly.
the helmetless head, they're
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, they're perfect. And then the like the hobgoblins, they're also completely, they're perfect for old world too.
I agree, but also the old, well, not I guess not old, but like the Age of Sigmar, uh, or the I don't know the Swamp Orcs.
The cruel boys hobgoblins.
That's the ones. Like they were already like
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
perfect
You're right.
hobgoblins.
You're right. The guys with the blunderbusses, I'm less of a fan, but I think again, if you change their heads, they'll be fine. Okay, so let's last question on Chaos Dwarfs. I'll probably take this one because I'm like super familiar with the army to kick off there, Andrew. But like, so you know, if you're an old world player and you're looking at this list and you're thinking like, how can I use it in the old world? Um, you know, and do you think do we think it has enough like of the right options you need to build an old world army? So kicking off looking at this release, so there's a lot of sculpts, as I mentioned, that are basically 1-to-1 usable in your old world Chaos Dwarf army. So the War Despot, like the general guy, is a fantastic Castellan or Seneschal on foot. Maybe you do a weapon swap, maybe you don't. Like it could be a great weapon, that's fine. The Demon Smith, I think he's also called the Demon Smith in Age of Sigmar, is just, you don't need to do anything to that guy. He's a perfect Demon Smith or Sorcerer Prophet in the old world on foot. There's the Ashen Elder guy, which Andrew, I haven't sent you a picture of, but it's a a convert. It's basically an alternate build of the Sorcerer Prophet or the Demon Smith there. So I think the Ashen Elder would be a great battle standard bearer on foot. Like he looks the part for me. I think you can use the Infernal Cohort as your Infernal Guard or Infernal Ironsworn, almost like 1-for-1. Spears, as I mentioned, are not an option. So maybe either you consider those to be halberds on Infernal Ironsworn, which is not, you know, which is makes sense, or you could just swap out the weapons and it's a super easy conversion, and they're ready for old world. Like their bodies are not too different from your Forge World era Chaos Dwarfs. So there's that. The Infernal Razors, which are like the ranged infantry guys, I think they have more options than the old Forge World kit in that like you have Blunderbuss and then something else which is basically a Fireglaive option. So you know, you can use those basically as stand-in Infernal Guard with blunderbusses or fireglaves as you want, so that works. Hobgoblins are hobgoblins. I don't think these ones have a bow and arrow option, so you're doing hand weapon and shield. Thankfully for you guys, in the new meta, you probably want to take hand weapon and shield anyways, so that's good news. The Death Shrieker is an exact Death Shrieker in the old world. I actually think this Death Shrieker is cooler than the one I have, like the Forge World era Death Shrieker, which just looks like a bunch of
What?
metal. Yeah, it just looks like a bunch of metal parts together. I think this one is super usable. It's cool too. And then
I
the Bull
prefer the
Centaur.
old one.
Yeah, I prefer the old one. Fine. I mean, I like the old one too. There's no issue. I think this is a cool artillery piece. And
That's
then
fine.
the Bull Centaurs, as we mentioned, I think are 1-for-1 usable. You can't take dual hand weapon options, if I remember correctly, with your Bull Centaurs in the old world. But you can take hand weapon and shield, and you can't take a great weapon, which there's also options for. So you don't do the helmeted head. You put the regular head on, and you use the hand like the great weapon, and like they fit entirely perfectly in the old world. Like there's nothing high fantasy or higher fantasy on this Bull Centaur than there is in like the Forge World ones. Um, Yeah, so those are the things you can easily do with this line. There's some missing items, however, that you're probably seeing in an old world Kastorf army. So there's no option for an Iron Demon, unfortunately. I mean, I guess you could use the Kadai Destroy type guy, put him on the right size base, and call him an Iron Demon. But that's, I think you're kind of stretching it at that point. So you're probably going to have to look at something third party. And then the no Lamasu is also an issue, I think, because it's such an iconic model for the range, and I think it's actually pretty decent in game 2. And then no bolt throwers. I think like in the Cruel Boys range for AOS, you probably can find like a bolt thrower that works very well, or you could just use a Goblin bolt thrower from the old world Orcs and Goblins line and just put some Hobgoblins beside it instead of some regular Goblins. That could work. But those are like some of the missing bits. Probably cover most of it. Did I forget anything, Andrew?
I think you covered all of it.
Yeah. So if you like the aesthetic of this line and it works for you, like I think it's usable in the old world. Oh, I didn't mention it, but the great, like the, how they call it in this game, like the Taurus, the Infernal Taurus or whatever it's called there, the mechanical bull, like has the rider has like a sorcerer prophet and then a seneschal type of option that you can use on it. So you can definitely make a Bale Taurus out of this guy if you like the mechanical look for the bull. I'm less of a fan, but I think it totally works in game. So yeah, so there's also that option too. Cool. Okay, so I think we've covered it. We've done all the preview stuff. Andrew, anything you want to shout out before we close out this one?
No, I got nothing really, other than CCBB tickets are still on sale. So if you're interested in coming to a 2-day, 5-game event with
6-game event,
nice,
6-game, yeah,
6-game event,
yeah,
with nice catered meals and sweet haul, come check us out. Links for that will be in the show notes. Other than that, no, I have nothing to shout out.
awesome. Yeah, same for me. Make sure you sign up for CCBB. We're a month out. Tickets are gonna start moving here in the last few weeks. It's a fantastic event. Like I mentioned it many times. It's one of my favorite events that I've been to. So yeah, that's the first thing, and basically the only thing right now. So yeah, thank you for sticking out with us for this whole episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, we'll see you around next time.